right, so with the playoffs right around the corner and likely the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in sights, is there any chance the Eagles could make a run? Well, Shane Haff from On the Shane page joins to discuss that as well as reasons Jordan Davis may be struggling, along with the rest of the Birds tape. So let's break it down. But first, let's run it. There's frustrations all over the place, and naturally so, but just walk me through as you're breaking it down, as you're analyzing that sequence of Brian Johnson's play calling, or whether it was Nick Sirianni, who knows, but what's going on there?
Yeah, I was not in love with how that whole sequence played out, and I guess you start off with the 1st and 20, and I don't have a problem with the play call on 1st and 20. I mean, you look at how the Cardinals lined up, and you were essentially +2 in the box. They've got 2 receivers flexed out to the left. Arizona has 3 guys over those 2, as well as a deep safety on the hash. So the Eagles essentially have 9 guys, counting Jalen Hurts in the box, and the Cardinals only have 7. Like, that's as you love to be +1 in the box. The Eagles were +2, and so you can look at some execution things there that could very well have even been a touchdown run if it's blocked up a little bit better. You get 4 yards. That's fine. Where I start to really have a problem is once you get to 2nd down. It's 2nd and 16. And this time the Cardinals come out and they're showing a clear cover 0 blitz look. It's no longer a positive box count. It's a neutral box count. You can tell by pre-snap alignment, they're sitting the house, right? It's one-on-one coverage everywhere. And the Eagles chose to run into that. And Brian Johnson talked about trying to catch him in a pass look. That just simply wasn't the look. That's a perfect situation. And this has been an issue for the Eagles all season, is dealing with those sort of blitzes. But, it's a perfect situation to run A.J. Brown on an out route. And, the corners are playing with inside leverage. You could run a slant. You could probably still get Brown open on a slant against inside leverage, but run him on that out route. He's running away from leverage, away from traffic. He'd literally have to break a tackle and it's a touchdown. You could even sell me on max protecting and running Devonta Smith on a sluggo, slant and go, and try to get him to bite on that. You might score a touchdown. I just thought it's ridiculously over conservative to call a QB run in that situation, and you lose 4 yards. Then you get to 3rd and 20, and I mean, that's a tough spot. You're not going to convert a lot of those. Now, they did convert one last week against the Giants, and
yep.
I'd rather see you let Jalen Hurts try to create something, but they go empty. The Giants show a cover 0 look again. Now, they bail out of it, but they show that look, and when you're in empty, you have no option but to get the ball out hot, because all they have to do is rush 6 and it's a free runner. The Eagles check into a screen. That's kind of their default check out of empty, but they let the defense dictate that to them. And so first and 20, I got no problems. After that, it really went off the rails. It was way overly conservative. And I mean, it ends up costing the Eagles the game.
You mentioned they're conservative, like Jonathan Gannon. As much as I've said it publicly a number of times, I hate him. A lot of people hate him and the lies and all this other stuff. But like, he knew what the scheme was going to be, or at least the predictability of saying like, yep, there's probably going to be some conservatism. That's why he goes with the onside kick. And next thing you know, the Eagles make it easier because you're playing for a field goal. And frustration, I don't even know is it the right word, but whenever Brian Johnson's like, I don't know if I can answer the question for you of why we're doing it. It's like, well, okay, Sirianni is clearly going with that. He's dictating the play call in that sense, but it's still the situation of, like you say, the 2nd and 16, lots of frustration. I feel like that can be, I don't know, maybe the metaphor or just a great example for how this season's gone, like you said. But I mean, overall, there's so many struggles with this offense. Like, there's so many things that we can pick apart. You've talked about it too. I saw, I think, a number of tweets about the predictability of the offense in itself. But I mean, is there a way to summarize like where are the main struggles? Is there a way to fix this thing? Where are you at with all these?
Yeah, the Eagles offense, I won't say it's struggling. I mean, there's still a offensive DVOA. Look at just the last 5 games, 4 of which were losses. The Eagles offense is 7th in the league in EPA per play, 6th in success rate. It's not as dominant as it was last year, but the offense is still functioning well. I mean, at the end of the day against the Cardinals, they punted 2 times the entire game. It was I saw that it was the 5th best game by success rate by an offense this season. It's just we'll get to the defense, I'm sure, but there's some things I don't like about the offense. I think they get overly reliant on big plays. They big play hunt too much at times. They struggle to deal with the blitz, but ultimately it's just some situational things. Like overall, I think the offense is good. You get into that situational football of 1st and 10 when you're trying to drink clock and put a game away, and DeAndre Swift tries to bounce a run outside and you get a holding. That's not on Jordan Mailata. He doesn't know where the running back's at, and it gets you to 1st and 20. You get, a 3rd and 5 after the Cardinals march 75 yards for a touchdown to open the second half. You get to a 3rd and 5, a cover 0 look, and you dial up a shot play to Devonta Smith instead of throwing a 5-yard slant route to move the sticks. Now, if Devonta Smith catches that ball, are we talking about that play? Probably not. And he could have, and he probably normally would. It's a tough catch, but it just doesn't have to be that hard. And so I think it's situational things and dealing with the blitz, big play hunting that are the problem issues for the offense. But the reality is that the offense has to be nearly perfect to overcome the total ineptitude on the defensive side of the ball.
It was Ben Solak, I believe, who had mentioned or put the stat out there first that I saw. It was like the worst defensive efficiency since like 2011, something like that. So it speaks for itself, obviously, whenever we're coming away from a game saying, hey, guess what? The Cardinals didn't punt. Like there was not a single punt in that situation. And we'll move to the defense here in a second because, yes, I'm curious to get the breakdown on what you're seeing, lots of storylines on that side. But sticking with the offense for a second, because you're right, there's moments that we see it, and a lot of times it's situationally, though, that there's concern or frustration or whatever we want to call it on that side. But Sirianni's name has naturally, everyone's seen come up quite a bit of fire Sirianni. He's on the hot seat. There's understandable with certain things or situations. Did he lose the locker room? Whatever you want to believe with some reports coming out there, depending on who the reporter and story is on that side. But just curious in your sense, from what you've seen on the film, what you've seen from the players, overall, your thoughts. Do you feel like Sirianni, not saying he needs to be fired, but is he on the hot seat at least in terms of what the Eagles have done and maybe, I don't know, underperforming expectations?
Yeah, that's a tough one because you look at his overall record in his time here, and it's been really, really good. And you try to peek under the hood at the dynamics in the Eagles front office, and I'm not sure anybody really knows what's going on there. What was it Nick Sirianni's decision to sideline Sean Desai? Did that come down from Howie Roseman? Are those the people he wanted to hire in the beginning, or is he sort of just a yes man for how? I don't know the answer to any of that. And if he's standing on his own 2 feet, these are the guys he wanted to hire, and he's the one making these moves, that looks bad. But we've known Howie to meddle at times on things like that. So it's hard for me to diagnose that. When we look at the offense, however, it's really clear to me that this is Nick Sirianni's system. You can look at, I think it was last year, the Eagles were like 31st in pre-snap motion. They're 32nd this year. Well, last year you have Shane Steichen calling this offense, who goes to Indianapolis and is top 10 in pre-snap motion now. And that's just one little thing, and pre-snap motion's not like a magic pill. But it's clear that things are coming down from Sirianni, or maybe from Howie. I don't know how that works, but it's not Brian Johnson's offense. It's Nick Sirianni's offense. And I think everything with the resistance to motion and the focus on big plays and the focus on preventing big plays, like we could talk about Jonathan Gannon and we could talk about Sean Desai and Matt Patricia's defense. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of these things are coming from the top down, the focus on big plays and avoiding them. And I think that's got to change. I don't think Sirianni's in danger of getting fired, especially like now that you've got, whether it's true or not, you've got A.J. Brown coming out and defending him. And whether it's true or not, even if A.J. Brown's lying, you've got a coach or a player that is like invested enough in this coach to lie for him to the media. Like that says a lot too. So I don't think he's lost the locker room.
Yeah.
There's some definite changes that need to happen. I don't know what the solution is there, but they need to get outside of the people that we knew once. Like a lot of people have talked about Frank Wright coming back. It's like, I really think you need another voice. Mm-hmm. And coaches are kind of known to hire their buddies. And that's always a problem when you hire a young coach. Or we even saw that with Doug Peterson. Like when the first guys got poached away, he really struggled to replace those. That's where Sirianni's at right now. And they did the internal promotion thing on the wrong side of the ball. Denard Wilson should have been the defensive coordinator, but you got to figure that out, because you can't, the brain drain is a real thing, and figuring out how to combat that is the thing that Doug Peterson didn't figure out. Hopefully Nick Sirianni can.
I'm right there with you, because I've said it on my show here before, actually multiple times, but it's like, look, I understand the frustration. I don't feel like Sirianni is going to get fired. I don't think that that's going to happen. Now, I think there could be and probably should be some changes as far as the coordinators and the offensive scheme. And hey, does someone come back and say, hey, Sirianni, if this is legit, your decision, you need to be hands off. We're coming in with someone else to take over the offense, to run the offense, to scheme it. Hopefully. But like you mentioned, I mean, I'm a recruiter by trade, and like the number one thing that we talk about when you're looking to hire a candidate is diversity of thought. Like that is how you improve an organization. That's how you have differences of ideas, creativity. And it just feels like it's stagnant at times, because maybe it is, hey, you got a yes man and you have another guy who it's a buddy and we run the same thing. And not that doesn't always work, but it's the NFL. And as everybody knows, it's a copycat league, and very quickly teams catch up, even if something worked, a year ago or 2 years ago. So I'm with you on that. I'm curious to get your thoughts too, because I know Jalen Hurts has also been the talk. He was snubbed with a Pro Bowl. I don't know how much people buy into Pro Bowls and how much it really matters. I don't think it matters much to the players if you see their reactions from being announced who got it and who didn't. But still, the talk, naturally becomes from some people's, is Jalen regressing? He has these turnovers, sure, and some of them are kind of fluky or whatever. But that's always a constant theme, especially when you give a quarterback big money like this. What are you seeing from the tape, and what have you seen recently from Jalen as far as, is he regressing? Are there other signs? Thoughts just overall with number one?
Yeah, I don't think he's regressing. So we can lead off with that. I don't think that he's regressing. And you can look at the statistics. I mean, last year he was second in EPA. This year he's fourth. Last year he was seventh in success rate. This year he's eighth. Last year he was fourth in completion percentage over expectation. This year he's second. So, I mean, we're pretty much like in the ballpark of where we were last year, maybe slightly worse in some categories. Hey, I mean, look at Patrick Mahomes and the season that he's having this year compared to last year. It's hard to be like, that level all the time. And so that's the first point. I don't think he's regressing. Now there's things that he needs to work on for sure. There's, the bailing out of the back of pockets, getting to those checkdowns. And again, I don't know, there's not a lot of checkdowns. There's not a lot of hots or side adjusts in their offense. Is that because Jalen Hurts can't see it and is uncomfortable with it? If so, that's an issue. Is it because Jalen Hurts thinks he can just make a guy miss and get a big play? Is it because that's what he's being coached to do? I don't know what's going into that, but that's got to change. Like, you need to change that part of it. But we look at Jalen Hurts and, his expected completion percentage this season is among the lowest in the league. And yet his completion percentage over expectation is second to only Kirk Cousins, who has missed half the season. So what that says is that Jalen Hurts is routinely presented with the hardest throws in the NFL, and he's exceeding expectations. And you go look at, Patrick Mahomes has the highest expected completion percentage in the NFL. There's an element of scheming these guys open, and that doesn't happen a lot for the Eagles. They rely on their superstar players to make superstar plays, and they largely do. The biggest thing I think that makes the offense look different this year, aside from, Shane Steichen had such a phenomenal feel for play calling in games, is the fact that Jalen Hurts hasn't been the same as a runner. And that started out as maybe we're going to try to protect him, which I largely agree with. And then you got the knee injury, and I don't know how that all factors into it. And he's starting to run more now. And if you want to cling to something going into the playoffs, it's that Hurts is starting to look better as a runner of the football. I don't think Hurts is regressing. I think he's got some of the same issues he's always had. And every quarterback has their issues at some point, and you deal with those. And you deal with these. You hope Hurts improves as a guy against the blitz and being a little more comfortable in the pocket. And I don't see any reason that he can't do that. He's improved on a lot of his game year over year. I think he'll continue to get better.
There you go. I love that too. Again, for people that are trying to cling to some positivity, optimism, I'm the eternal optimist. I mean, it's something that I usually try to be almost every time. And I understand that people are like, you got to stop after the loss against Arizona. But like you said, I mean, hey, there's the possibility of maybe a little bit more running like we've seen recently with Jalen Hurts. So there's a little bit of a wrinkle that teams haven't seen for most of the season. So, who knows what happens? Again, I think it comes back to the defense, and can the defense hold up its end of the bargain? That is the massive question that we have not seen, certainly not against Arizona. What about the defense? Let's talk about that. There's so many things that you could probably say from the struggles, from the failures. It's coaching, it's players, it's scheme, it's disconnectedness from all three phases of the defense. But just your overall kind of general takeaway, and we'll get into some specifics here in a second too. But what are you seeing from the defense? Just in general, give it to me straight. Is it as bad as it looks? Is it worse? What are we talking about?
It's a complete and total train wreck. I mean,
okay.
Man, it's been so bad. It's a poorly coached unit. It's a poorly constructed unit. Like, you can literally throw a dart at the dartboard and you can assign blame. You can blame Howie for the roster he put together on defense. You can blame Sean Desai. You can blame Matt Patricia. You can blame players. I mean, the Eagles had a missed tackle rate of 13.8% in this last game against the Cardinals. It doesn't matter how good your scheme is. If you're missing a tackle 1 out of every 10 plays, you're not going to function well as a defense. That's not a one-game thing. It was like 11.8% against Seattle. It was like 13% against San Francisco. So they're poor tackling. That's on players. I think they're poorly schemed up. I think it can go down to roster construction as well. Like, Howie Roseman has stretched this not caring about linebacker and safety about as far as it can go, and you're at your breaking point. And the NFL evolves over time. The we don't care about linebackers and safeties approach, that worked when you had a guy like Jim Schwartz as your defensive play caller, and not because Jim Schwartz was some mastermind. I mean, you go see what he's done in Cleveland this year. It's obvious that it's working for him, but it's not to say that he's some mastermind. It's a different scheme. Like, he played single high. They were +1 in the box. And when you're going to be +1 in the box, your linebacker play is not as important because we've already got a numbers advantage. Well, now the Eagles are dedicated to playing neutral or light boxes. They want to play nickel personnel, so light defense, 2 safeties high, light box. Well, now all of a sudden you need linebackers that can make plays downhill in the run game. You need defensive line to take over the game, and they've tried to do that. They spent a first-round pick on Jordan Davis. They spent a first-round pick on Jalen Carter. They brought back Fletcher Cox. They spent a first-round pick on Nolan Smith. Like, they've invested in the trenches. It's not enough to overcome what they have out there at linebacker. And I know that there's been, Zach Cunningham's hurt. Nakobe Dean, you spend a third-round pick on the guy, and he's hurt. Mm-hmm. So you've got a lot of issues there. And it's fair to point those out. It's also fair to point out that they were pinning all of their hopes on a third-round draft pick that played like 12 snaps as a rookie and a street free agent that they signed for under $2 million in Zach Cunningham. Yep. And so it's hard for me to say, well, they're injured. Like, it was never going to be great to begin with. It could be better than it is, but it was fundamentally flawed. And you look at the same thing at safety. I mean, I like Reed Blankenship, but he's a UDFA. Kevin Byard's over 30, and you brought him in because Justin Evans, a guy who hasn't played in 2 years, that was your starting plan, he got hurt, shockingly. That's why he hasn't played in 2 years. And so you think about the best team in the AFC is the Baltimore Ravens, right? The best team in the NFC is the 49ers.
Yep.
What do those two teams have in common? They've got studs at linebacker, right? Yep. And this isn't me saying you should spend first-round picks on linebacker, but it's me saying if you want to live in a too-high world, nickel personnel, light packages, light boxes, you got to have guys at linebacker. And so the Eagles either need to shift their scheme, which you could do, or they've got to shift their team-building philosophy. But you can't live in a too-high world with light boxes and no linebackers. That just doesn't work. The Eagles have proven that over the last year.
Yeah, you're right. I was talking about this in the live show yesterday or 2 days ago, but same deal is kind of the thought of the question that I brought up is like, how much does the linebacker matter? Again, it's to your point, like you can get away with it for a little bit, but eventually it catches up to you, and you see teams like you're talking about with the Niners and the Ravens, which I think are clear cut above in terms of just having those linebackers being able to make plays, being dominant at a lot of times, and you pay a price for it. So the hope is, kind of like you're talking about too, is okay, maybe can the D-line help offset that? But as we've seen too, the D-line has struggled. The D-line hasn't lived up to expectations. And so it just, I think, amplifies the issue of like you're alluding to. And so as we look at the D-line even, I think it's natural. I've said this a couple different times, but it's natural to not go into this season thinking like, all right, we're going to get 70 sacks. Like that was a great, phenomenal year, but like teams don't do that. That's not a recurring thing of, let's get another 70 sacks or close to it. But still, I think the thought and the hope, certainly when you get Jalen Carter and early on when he's playing really well, is, hey, maybe this is going to be close. Maybe this is going to be almost reminiscent of last season, and it's really started to fall off. Now, I know you could say, well, it's a tougher schedule. You're playing better quarterbacks this season. Guys are tired maybe because the play calls, the snaps that they've got. But in general, what are we talking about for the D-line struggles, and how glaring is it overall?
Yeah, so you can go to snap counts, and we can talk about that. Because right now you have Haason Reddick. He's within like 40 snaps of playing his career high at snap counts. Josh Sweat has already shattered his career high. Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter have both played more snaps than they ever played in a year in college, obviously. So that's certainly an element. Now, for Josh Sweat, maybe you're concerned that, this is a guy who came out of Florida State and there were concerns about his knee, and that's why he dropped in the draft. And he didn't practice a lot in college because of the knees. And his load was managed a lot through his early time in Philadelphia, and he was really good last year in less snaps. So maybe you're concerned that he simply can't play this volume. And if that's true, that's okay. You just can't pay him to be a starter if he can't play, 75% of the snaps. And so that's worth monitoring. For Haason Reddick, I think Haason Reddick's still generally been pretty good. Jalen Carter, he's a rookie. And it's well documented that rookies, especially rookie defensive linemen, hit a wall where they're just not used to playing that much. It's less excusable for a guy like Jordan Davis, who's in his second year as a pro. And this was a concern for him all the way through college. And as I've watched him, I know Brian Baldinger called him out, and there's a lot of things going on there, and I don't know what's true and what's not. All I know is he was dominant at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
Like Jordan Davis was number 7 on my big board in his draft, and Kyle Hamilton was number 1, but we don't have to talk about that. But I was happy that they got
Philly
Jordan
fans
Davis
by saying that, but
yeah. And I was taking some victory laps early this year because he looked so good and he's faded so much so like I've wondered if he's injured. Maybe he is. Maybe, it wouldn't surprise me if we find out after the season, Jordan Davis is having some sort of surgery because he's been playing hurt. Mm-hmm. Maybe it is conditioning. I don't know, but I do know it's problematic. He's also not getting any help. Like I posted some clips of him not doing the best job taking on double teams. The reality is linebackers have to fill those gaps too. Like, mm-hmm. And I don't think if you're going to draft a defensive tackle who doesn't have pass rushing chops in the top 15 of the draft, he needs to be in Ndamukong Suh and just drop anchor and not move against double teams. And Jordan Davis isn't doing that. He's okay. He's not solving the problem in the way the Eagles wanted, which brings me back to linebacker. The Eagles have to invest in linebacker if they want to continue to run this scheme. And I think it'll help out the defensive line as well.
Yeah. I'm with you. It's you go back and forth again. I've seen the same reports. I talked about it too with the Baldinger singling out JD. It's like I don't know. There's a lot of different areas you could go with it. So I don't know if necessarily go after just Jordan Davis, but it's not been near as good. Like you said, I mean, I was the same. I was like, yes, let's go. Like JD's got 2.5 sacks through the first 4 games, or I think it was. And he's playing lights out, and then all of a sudden, you don't see it near as much. So I don't know. But I believe the report was he missed practice yesterday, and that today he's back practicing. But I don't know if it'll be limited. I don't think that's fully come out yet at the time of the recording. But he's at least at practice. So I don't know if there's an ankle injury that was serious or what, but I'm sure, again, we'll see what it ends up being. But There's got to be changes. There's already been changes as far as Matt Patricia taking over for Desai and whoever's decision that was, whether it was Sirianni's, like we were referencing earlier, was it a Howie Roseman decision, somebody telling him to do it? Who knows? But Matt Patricia is, for all effective purposes, the defensive coordinator, even though if that's maybe not his title. He's being the defensive coordinator, the acting one. But so far from what we've seen, and as we've been talking about, I mean, is it really better at all? I mean, is there any positives from that? Has he come in any way? And, for what you're seeing, going like, okay, at least we can hold on to this or, whatever it is. Or, in the 3 games that it's been, I know that's not a huge sample size, but is it still too early to tell with Patricia?
It's been markedly worse, in my opinion. And now, is that all Patricia? Because Darius Slay had surgery right at the time that happened. True. So you've been down your best cornerback. And contrary to what people want to say about Darius Slay, he's played really well this year. And so losing Slay hurt. But yeah, Patricia, I think, has been really bad. The defense has become really predictable. And, third down, like when I watch all 22, you sort of lose track of down and distance at times because you're not seeing a scoreboard. There's no commentary. It's just a view. And it's always nice when the Eagles are on defense because I know for sure when it's third down because they do the same thing every time. They go too high safeties. They put their linebackers up on the line and they bail them into coverage and they spin it into single high almost every time. And then I'll be like, oh, yep, this is a third down. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work. People are fired up about dropping Haason Reddick into coverage like they did against the Cardinals. And it's all tied together, though. You can't stop the run from your 4 down front, so you got to go 5 down. And then when the Cardinals spread you out, you don't want to just rush 5, so you end up with Haason Reddick in coverage. And it's just a mess of personnel. It's a mess of a lot of things. Patricia's not it. Patricia's never coached a good defense away from Bill Belichick, which we know who the credit for that goes to. I stand by that bringing in a guy who failed as a head coach in Detroit, ran back home to New England and became a failed offensive coordinator. Like bringing that guy in when he was very publicly at odds with your CB1 was a bad decision. Yeah. Putting him in charge was a bad decision. I said at the time I was pretty out on Desai. I thought Desai was doing a lot of things that were just bad. And I said that, I basically said the week that he got fired in my show with Johnny, I said that basically I'm out on him now. And if I was in charge, he would be coaching for his job the rest of the season. Well, they fired him or they didn't fire him. He's totally still the defensive coordinator. He just doesn't call plays or coordinate the defense or anything like exactly. that. He sits up there with the interns charting plays, but totally the DC.
Oh yeah.
Felt like a panic move. And, if it works out, then people say, hey, they tried something. It wasn't working. They tried it out. But the thing was, everybody said at the time, well, it can't get much worse. It got worse. It can always get worse. And it has. And I don't know that it's going to get better with Patricia calling the plays either.
It's so sad. Yeah. And I'm so guilty of that. I was literally saying the exact same. I was like, hey, you know what? It can't get worse. I was optimistic because I was like, where can we go from there? It can't get worse. It can only get better. And, we'll see some sort of improvement. And then, like you said, I've been proven wrong, very wrong. So I don't know. Hopefully you got some differences. We'll see maybe some positivity. I got to ask real quick too, because I've been accused of being a Nolan Smith stan account. Nolan Smith, massive fan supporter. I love Nolan Smith. Like that was the biggest hype probably throughout the offseason for me. Not a huge expectation that he's going to, come in and just be groundbreaking from day one. And, we know for a lot of pass rushers, it doesn't necessarily hit on the rookie season. But I love the potential. There's lots of things that he does need to fix, but something that I keep seeing, I know you've seen it because I saw it on X with a couple comments, but it's this whole idea that Nolan Smith is too small. And I think your comment too, of even like the comparisons of Haason Reddick and, where Nolan Smith could be, again, give him some time to develop. But I just got to hear from you because, again, being a huge Nolan Smith supporter and holding out hope, let's not make a quick rash judgment as some people are. Overall thoughts on Nolan Smith. Do you see the potential in him still? Why can people, not rush to be too quick to judge?
Yeah, people are saying, Nolan Nolan Smith's too small. He was always too small. Well, he wasn't. He was a first-round grade for most people. He was 16th on my big board. And you talk about too small, you look on the Eagles roster and you see, Haason Reddick coming out with 6'1", 237. Nolan Smith is 6'2", 238, literally an inch and a pound, bigger than Haason Reddick. And it took Haason Reddick some time. Haason Reddick was in his 4th year before he hit double-digit sacks. And his first 3 years combined was like 7.5 sacks. And that's not saying he's going to be Haason Reddick. That's like saying every day 3 quarterback's going to be Tom Brady. That's not necessarily going to happen.
True.
But Nolan Smith's defining trait in college was as a run defender. It wasn't as a pass rusher. He was super athletic, but he didn't know how to rush the passer, and he still really doesn't. That's why I think the Eagles have done a disservice to him, dropping into coverage early in the year, trying him at off-ball linebacker. Like, if I was the Eagles, I would have sat down with Nolan Smith and said, listen, you're going to play 12 snaps a game as a rookie, and you're going to rush the passer, and our goal for you this season, you're great as a run defender. Our goal for you this season is to develop one pass rush counter move, because you can't just run around the edge on all these offensive tackles. We're going to work on a ghost move. We're going to work on a spin move, some counter move. That's our goal this year. And I would let him rush the passer 12 times a game, and we would see where we get. Nolan Smith hasn't had much of a chance to rush the passer. Now, he's got some really good reps on film against the run. Mm-hmm. He blew up Kyle Juszczyk in a play against the 49ers. He's got a few good he did a dip move on Deion Dawkins for the Bills, who's a really good tackle. He wasn't able to finish. He ended up, he lost his footing as he came around the corner, but he's got the athleticism. He could probably do, he needs technical refinement. He definitely could, build up some strength. I think he's a good run defender. He should have been playing more. And, I would love for, people have talked about should the Eagles play their starters or not in week 18. You could just make this your bye. I don't know what their approach is going to be. I assume they'll play their guys, but I would love to see Nolan Smith just get 25 snaps on Sunday. Let this guy go play. Yeah. Let's see what he can do, because I do think he's a talented player, and I think it's ridiculous that people are out on him 147 snaps into his career.
It's the instant coffee world we live in. Hey, did you do it in 140 snaps? No, all right, you're a wash. How many times do you come back and look at it? There's countless players we can point to and be like, oh, wow, they were terrible. And all of a sudden you come back and you're like, okay, maybe we were wrong. We rushed to judgment. So, all right, I love it. That makes me feel good. I've been thinking the same thing. It's like, hey, look, we're not expecting the world for Nolan Smith yet. I know Jalen Carter can be an anomaly of come in from, preseason snap 1 and go, this dude's going to wreck the NFL, So we saw that. But yes, hope for Nolan. As we wrap up here too, and again, if people are not following already, I'm telling you, you're missing out. Shane Haff, on Bleeding Green Nation, on the Shane page with Johnny Page, as well as Chalk Talk host and Shane Haff, or at Shane Haff NFL. Go follow him on X. But as we wrap up here, can you leave the folks with anything positive? I know there's a lot of struggles. We got to get a lot of improvement. We're about to go into the playoffs. Who knows, as you kind of mentioned or alluded to, whether we're going to see the starters or a blend, or maybe you play a half and then rest. But something to be positive or optimistic about from what you're seeing or hopeful from this team.
Yeah, I give you one on both sides of the ball. I'll start with offense because that one's easier. Yeah. The offense has been playing well. You've got Jalen Hurts is moving better. They're using him in the run game, as well as the Eagles' run games become more diverse. You had to become more diverse. You can't just run inside zone and split zone when your quarterback's not a mobility threat. And there was a time in the season it wasn't. They've started to run out of pistol. They've started to do outside zone. They've done more, counter things. And so the run game is becoming more diverse. And now on top of that, you've got Jalen Hurts, who's throwing the ball as well as ever, getting his mobility back as well. So the offense firing at all cylinders going into the playoffs. I think the offense, you could expect the offense to go put up 30 points in a game in the playoffs. Now, will that be enough? That's where you get to the defense.
That's the question.
The defense is bad. There's no two ways about it. The optimism around the defense is just around getting guys back healthy. Darius Slay hopefully will be back in the playoffs. I know he's been a participant in practice. He's played well this season. I would like to see Keely Ringo be your other starting outside cornerback. I'm not sure if they'll do that. Ringo had a bit of a rough game against the Cardinals, but he was good the 2 weeks before that. So Avonte Maddox was dreadful against the Cardinals. It was his first game back from injury. So if you can get him sort of, up to speed, or just get Bradley Roby back out there, and then getting Zach Cunningham back will help in the run defense. And if the run defense can be a little better, it can allow you to play a little more structurally sound in your pass defense. So, I mean, it's not, I'm not here telling you the defense is going to hold a playoff team to 10 points, unless it's the Saints, then it's a possibility, or the Falcons. But I am telling you that they can get back to being like the number 20 defense in the league instead of the number 32 defense. Mm-hmm. And if you can be the number 20 defense with what the Eagles have on offense, you could go make a run in the playoffs. Now, do I think it's going to happen? No, probably not. I mean, I think the Eagles can go beat an NFC South team. I've got real doubts about them being able to beat a Dallas or a San Fran in the playoffs, but you never know. Crazier things have happened in the playoffs. So I do think there's reasons for optimism, and we'll see how it plays out.
That's true. You're telling me there's a chance. There's a chance there. So, no, I agree with you. Imagine that, though. Slay saving Patricia. Who would have thought we'd be in a world where he's hoping to get Slay back and maybe save him a little bit in terms of a playoff run? They got to prove a lot. They got to change a lot. And with it being this late in the season, we'll see. But hey, maybe we're coming back on, do this again soon, as far as breaking it down, and maybe they have turned a corner. I don't know, post first round playoffs or whatnot. But appreciate you again, Shane, coming on, breaking it down. Again, just for everybody, make sure to go follow. I think Seth Joyner had you on recently, right? Didn't he have on one of his shows too? Yeah,
I was on after the Giants game, and talked about how the Eagles, maybe we could say they were going to turn a corner now, and then they lost to the Cardinals. So, I don't know. He may not have me back now. Who knows?
Well, you may have jinxed. I jinxed it too, because I made a video entitled "Why the Eagles Will Embarrass Jonathan Gannon," and then we saw what happened. So, anyway, we'll leave that for another day. But again, appreciate you coming on. Until next time, we'll see you guys. Go Birds.
Go Birds.